Resilience. That's what the choir sang about. And you know, this past week has been a tough one for many of us who have worked for and have fought for many years for liberation. For it seems that the president, if in fact his party has a majority in the Senate, is above the law. And the fact that there was not even a opportunity for witnesses or further testimony, followed by his arrogant response to that party line vote, are kind of a triple whammy on top of all of it. And then to make matters worse, this follows that just about a week and a half ago, the Ninth Circuit Court dismissed the Children's Trust lawsuit that many of us had hopes would make a difference in climate justice in our country and the world. Anger, frustration, cynicism, and a sense of the impossibility of all are on the verge of taking hold of me. And I imagine others in this room as well. Resilience. Right now, I need resilience. We all need resilience. That sense of never giving up, of holding on, to bouncing back, to keep on keeping on. Last week, Katie lifted up 4 sources of resilience that we can turn to that she learned from her chaplaincy training. These sources are hope, the holy, meaning, and community. This morning, I in particular want to focus on community, on exemplary communities who, through their collective resilient actions and shared attitudes, show us that it can be done. If they bounce back, if they persevered, then I can too. Then we can too. As testimony about the resilient power that community can provide, I'll share 3 stories about situations I have witnessed or experienced resilience. The first story is from Haiti. Back in 2010, I was deeply honored and privileged as I came to the end of my seminary training to apply for and be selected to join a group of seminarians in a trip to Haiti, where we were going to work in partnership with a new program being initiated by the Unitarian Universalist Association and the UU Service Committee, who had sponsored our trip. Funding came from the Veach Foundation, and the journey was a pilot program for what in the years to follow would become the UUSC's College of Social Justice. College was a good name for it. I certainly learned a lot on that trip, and my heart was broken wide and opened to new learnings, and I believe expanded just a bit. For we went to Haiti just 6 months after the horrific earthquake that had devastated the capital of Port-au-Prince and much of the lowlands of Haiti. And even before the quake, Haiti was and still is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. For centuries, Haiti was brutally administered, the most brutal of France's colonies. And then when the slaves rose up in 1804 to liberate their nation, what followed were decades of hostility and isolation and abuse, most significantly from their neighbor to the north, the United States of America. The Haitian economy was long burdened by reparation payments that the final settlement said they would have to pay to the French. It seemed that the former slaves were expected to reimburse their former owners for their own freedom. Internal problems devastated Haiti further. A small and oppressive upper class replaced the French in drawing what they could from Haiti's fields and forests and the labor of the peasants. In the 20th centuries, The Duvaliers, the infamous Papa Doc, followed by his son called Baby Doc, were the last in a long line of ruthless oligarchs. Since the 1980s, Haiti has had a flawed and struggling democracy that sometimes has been subjected to periods of military rule. Tough times in Haiti. And nature has also not been kind to Haiti. Early in this century, tropical storms Jean and Faye and hurricanes Gustav, Hannah, and Ike caused massive damage and thousands of deaths. Then, on the top of all of this, came a 7.0 earthquake. In Port-au-Prince, after we arrived, I witnessed a level of devastation and human hopelessness beyond anything I had ever imagined. As we traveled in a van through the destroyed city, we saw hordes of people walking slowly, headed in what seemed no apparent direction, for in actuality, there was no safe place for them to go. I remember when the van stopped and a severely emaciated man came to the van window and signaled to us for food. We had made a pledge to not give to beggars while we were there. We had other work to do. But we had also pledged to not look away. And I remember as I looked into that man's eyes, the emptiness I saw chilled me to the bone. I believe I got a glimpse from that man at what Haitian culture calls a zombie. The Haitian poet Jean Mapu, in a poem titled Zombie, describes it thus: "My life's been gone. I've been looking here and there for her without hope. Oh yes, she's gone. I've looked over, all over, but I can't find her. I can't find her." We left the city and drove up into the highlands. And that night, I'm pleased to report, we found hope. We found hope with a very special community, the MPP, the Movement of the Peasants of Papai. Papai was the name of the region. Before the quake, UUSC had begun to develop what they call eye-to-eye relationships with a number of organizations in Haiti, including MPP. Now, this grassroots organization is made up of worker collectives called Goupons, who have persevered and offered a better life for thousands of peasants for over 40 years. The T-shirts that they gave us were the leftovers from their 30th anniversary celebration, and they've done it in difficult times. Their central training facility where we stayed is a kind of eco-oasis with composting toilets, innovative wastewater systems, amazing gardens and animal husbandry programs, schools, and a nursery for trees that grows hundreds of thousands of trees for a major reforestation effort. Their director said their goal is to plant at least 1 million trees in the highlands of Haiti. Now, when the quake happened, people whose homes had been destroyed and lives devastated fled to the highlands to stay with distant relatives. And over that season, all the food, all the grain in the households was consumed by hungry mouths, and that included the grain they normally would have set aside for next year's plantings. I am very proud to say the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee's first donation to MPP was seed for the next year's planting. Our group was there to help build a new eco-village that would house refugees from the earthquake. It was amazing to work there with the Haitian peasants and all the members of MPP. The kind of labor we did was just connecting. We passed stones from one to each other along a line to move them from the fields towards the foundation location. We dug ditches for those foundations, which were then built with those stones. We mixed mortar, and we made bricks, and we begun the walls of the first of over 100 houses that have been built over time. And as we worked, we sang. Now, they taught us phonetically a few Creole songs, and we struggled to sing along with them as we passed stones and worked together. And we taught them Spirit of Life. And we sang and we worked together. It was delightful. We shared meals, and one night at the training center, we all joined in the training hall and we danced together. We were acombites, again and again, working together in difficult times with deep joy. It was hot and humid, yet in the middle of it all, we were happy, and smiles spread across the faces of both the Haitians and the Blancs, which is the Haitian Creole word for whites. We helped them financially and physically with the build, and they in turn gifted each of us with an exemplary model of how joy and perseverance and a shared commitment to a better future can be resilience in action. It was liberation without conditions. My second story is from South Africa. As many of you know, my daughter Lindsay lives and works there and has been doing so off and on since 2004. It was back then that she co-created a small nonprofit called Tembanati that some of you have supported through the purchase of Zulu beadwork and other crafts. We sell it at a number of events still. Most recently, we sold at this church's bazaar this winter. Our table was right over there. Tembanati in Zulu means hope with us. We support craftspeople through the purchase of their goods, and we send profits back to the Zulu regions to fund preschools. Now, during her work there, Lindsay and her mother, and later it followed that Suzanne and I have established a special friendship with a Zulu family, the Sabellas. Nathantla is a single mother with 4 children. Her husband died in an automobile accident where the children were very young. Young children orphaned is an all too frequent reality in the Zulu region, which has one of the highest HIV rates still on the whole planet. So there have been many orphans from different reasons. Nathantla and her children established a special relationship with Lindsay when she was doing research work in that region. She sometimes stayed with the family when she was doing her doctoral research. Nathantla and her children have persevered. They had extended family nearby, the children's gogo, their grandmother, and several aunts and uncles that nearby offered some help. Now, when we established a new creche, that word, for the Zulu or English word as they call in that region for a preschool, it was on a home, the secondary dwelling in the Sabellas family compound. The Sabella family developed over many years this connection with our family, and in 2012, their daughter Natando spent a term in the University of Oregon's American English Institute, subsequently worked as an interpreter at research institutes in Zululand. When Suzanne and I traveled to South Africa in 2013, the Sabella family hosted us in that secondary building because we were there for the dedication of the new creche, which was larger and on a hill nearby. It was there in their family compound that I had the opportunity to witness firsthand the Zulu concept of Ubuntu. Now, Ubuntu is a term that has gotten somewhat use and somewhat familiar to some here in the West. Ubuntu. Desmond Tutu described it as meaning, I am because we are. Ubuntu. Lindsay, from her study of the Zulu language, says that literally, Ubu means essence, and Untu means to be human. So Ubuntu literally is the essence of what it means to be human. And that essence is communitarian, compassionate, and generous. The Sabella's home compound is humble by our standards, with small, simple rooms, a pit toilet, and a single water tap out in the yard. Unlike most of their neighbors, though, they also have a water storage tank that was installed during that period of time when the creche was located in their secondary building. Now, in their area, periodically, the municipal water system breaks down. That happened for several days when we were staying with them. We rationed waters within the household, and at the same time, the Sabellas gave it away. Throughout the day, their son, Sponito, affectionately called Spo, would periodically open the gate to the family compound neighbors who arrived with wheelbarrows filled with empty water jugs. And then they would leave with those jugs filled. The Sabellas believed if they had water, the whole neighborhood would have water. This is a very enterprising family, the Sabellas, I just have to tell you. They had a small snack and conveniences store on their family plot, sort of a Zulu 7-Eleven kind of operation, trying to figure out, can we make a little money here and there? But the idea of selling water never would have entered their minds. In Zulu culture, basic necessities are shared with the family and everyone in the larger community because they know at their core, I am because we are. In a time of limited access to water, the resiliency that the Sabellas water tank provided was shared with all in their community. My third story is more personal and much closer to home. You see, it took place right here. Well, not actually geographically right here, because it took place just over 25 years ago in this congregation's former home up in the South Hills. 25 years ago was a particularly difficult time in my life. Though I was not a zombie, I felt some days that it was only my commitment to keeping things together for my kids and somewhat of a semblance of a normal commitment in my workday that kept me going from day to day. Back then, my second marriage, which was my third major relationship, had failed. I was a full-time single dad for my then teenage son and part-time dad to Lindsay and Nick, the two kids with whom I had shared custody. Finances were tight, and I was emotionally and spiritually bereft. I decided to try to do something about that spiritual part, a part of my life that had been living on slim rations for many years. I decided to go to church, the Unitarian Universalist Church, to be specific. For back in my teen years, I had been part of LRY, an LRY group in Salem, just up the highway. For those who do not know that part of UU history, LRY stood for Liberal Religious Youth and was the combined youth groups of the American Unitarian Association and the Universalist Church of America. Later, the two faiths merged to become the Unitarian Universalist Association, but it was the youth who led the way. Now, things got a little intense sometimes in LRY. In the 1950s and 1960s, some critics called us the Little Red Youth. By the 1970s, the drug culture became a factor, and the conferences that we went to, got a little wild, and misbehavior by some led to the disbanding of LRY nationwide. But in 1967 and 1968, LRY in the Salem Church and the youth conferences, cons as they called them then and now, were a very important part of my coming of age years. In that UU church, I had found a spirituality and a community that was far more open and loving than the narrow, judgmental fundamentalism of my childhood church. I loved LRY and UU. So decades later, when I was in the dumps and wanted both to reactivate my spiritual side and find community, I figured UU might be a good place to go. So I showed up one Sunday. It was the summer, and back then, summer programs were based on discussion around a particular theme. I remember the topic of that Sunday was, should the United States be 911 for the world? A more globalist perspective than is currently encouraged in America. That very first Sunday, after the service, two men came up to me separately and invited me to attend the men's group. It was Peter Watton and Jim Home. Because they said there was this group of guys who met there every Sunday evening and just kind of talked to each other. Since it was my co-parenting week off for the younger kids, and I needed some space away from my then very challenging teenage son, I decided to go check it out. I walked into a book-lined room in the basement library of that building, and there was a circle of chairs with about a dozen men in them. Gil was there, and John, and Ken, and Neil, and Peter, and Jim, and Jack, and Larry, and I think Skip, but Skip may have started a couple weeks later. I'm not exactly sure. And even if I could remember these many years later the details about what was shared there, I couldn't tell you because I made a pledge of confidentiality that I still hold to. What I do recall is what I shared and how the whole circle listened intently and clearly demonstrated by the depth of their presence that they cared. What I shared was the difficulty I was having with my eldest son's decision to drop out of high school. He was a bright kid, but he'd gotten to the place where the most effective act of rebellion he could come up with was to drop out of school. It was effective in getting his father's attention. In fact, it was effective in sort of the other devastating his father. I felt I had failed as a parent. And when you added that to the already sense of failure I was feeling about relationships, I was pretty low. The men seated in that circle resisted the urge, an urge that's all too often ingrained in our culture to try and fix me. They offered no sage advice, nor tried to offer solutions. What they offered was loving presence. And by doing so, they reminded me we do not need to travel our journey alone. There was in that basement, and I soon found upstairs, a community, a faith community. Now, though the membership has changed over the years and we've moved to a new location, that community is right here, right now, today. Here we strive to be deeply present to each other, so none of us need to travel our life journey alone. We seek not to fix each other or expect alignment with a narrow sense of appropriateness, but rather we simply love each other. and come together as community. And whether it's a work party or a social justice event, a meeting or a celebration, we make a kumbite all of us can go to. So come on in, because in this kumbite, we're going to finish the task of liberation. Liberation without conditions. There are no restrictions. As long as there's love and will, this work will be accomplished, kumbite by kumbite. We're going to make a collective I'd love all of us to go to. May we make that kumbite together.